My mother orchestrated my boyfriend cheating with my older sister because I was too dramatic. 10 years later, I discovered the truth, and the confrontation destroyed my entire family. I'm 29 years old. I work in graphic design from home, and 10 years ago, I tried to take my own life because my own mother orchestrated for my boyfriend to sleep with my older sister. I know it sounds like something out of a cheap soap opera, but I swear to God every word of this is real. And I need to tell it because there are still days when I wake up and can't believe my own family was capable of something like this. I guess I should start from the beginning. When everything seemed normal, or what I thought was normal at that time. I was 17 when I met Ryan at a graduation party for a mutual friend. He was handsome, in that typical popular guy but not unbearable way, and for some reason he noticed me, who was more like the shy girl who sat at the back of the class. We started dating, and honestly, it was like a dream, like one of those high school relationships you think will last forever because you don't know anything else. We spent 2 years together, and I was completely convinced he was the love of my life. You know what I mean? We talked about getting married after college, having kids, all that shit you talk about when you're 19 and think you know how the world works. My family seemed to adore him. My mother always told me how lucky I was to have such a responsible and well-educated boyfriend. My father would invite him to watch games on Sundays, and my sister Victoria, who was 23 at the time and had just finished her business degree, was always super nice to him. Victoria and I were never super close. Honestly, she was the perfect daughter. The one who got straight A's, the one who never got in trouble, the one my mother always held up as an example. I was more the artistic one, the dreamer, the one my mother looked at with that expression of slight disappointment when I said I wanted to study design, instead of something more practical like accounting or law. Everything started to change in December. Right before Christmas, Ryan and I had been together for like 2.5 years at that point, and he was practically part of the family, coming over for dinner on Fridays and spending afternoons at home watching movies with me in the basement. I remember that Christmas gathering perfectly because there was something weird in the atmosphere, like a tension I couldn't identify, but that I felt in my stomach every time I walked into a room. My mother was strangely animated, like too cheerful, and Victoria kept looking at her phone with this little smile that got on my nerves. Ryan was also acting kind of weird, showing up late, leaving early, saying he had to help his father with some project or whatever. And when I'd ask him what was wrong, he'd just say he was stressed about final exams at college. Christmas night, everything exploded in the most horrible way you can imagine. We had all had dinner together, opened presents, and I was happy because Ryan had given me a necklace with my initials that must have cost like $300. And I was thinking, this man really loves me, you know? After dinner, I went to the second-floor bathroom because the one downstairs was occupied, and when I went up the stairs, I heard laughter coming from Victoria's room. I didn't think much of it at first, like I thought she was talking on the phone with a friend or something, but something made me stop in front of her door. The door was slightly open, just a crack, and when I looked inside, I saw Ryan and Victoria kissing. It wasn't an accidental kiss or a brush of lips. No, they were completely making out on her bed, his hands on her waist, hers in his hair, and I just stood there like an idiot, unable to process what I was seeing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry at that moment. I just froze watching the scene like I was watching a horror movie where you know something terrible is going to happen but you can't look away. Finally, Ryan saw me in the reflection of the mirror Victoria had next to her bed and separated from her so fast he almost fell. Victoria turned around and looked at me with wide eyes, but I swear I saw something in her expression. It wasn't shame or regret. It was more like surprise that I had found out, like she didn't expect me to catch them yet. Ryan started stammering something. Hannah, wait. It's not what you think. I can explain. All that typical garbage liars say when they get caught. But I was already running down the stairs. I got to the living room where my parents were and I yelled at them to come upstairs to see what Ryan and Victoria were doing. And my mother looked at me with that annoyed expression like I was interrupting something important. She went up anyway and my father followed her. And when we got to Victoria's room, they were both separated, sitting on opposite sides of the bed as if nothing had happened. I started telling them what I had seen, the words coming out of my mouth so fast I could barely breathe, and my mother raised her hand to shut me up. Hannah, she said in that calm voice she used when she wanted to make it seem like I was the one being dramatic, you need to calm down and stop making a scene. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her I had seen them kissing, that they had been doing it behind my back for who knows how long. And my father looked at Victoria and asked her if that was true. She nodded, but then said something that broke me to pieces. She said, "I'm sorry, Hannah, but Ryan and I fell in love. These things happen. It wasn't something planned." Ryan was standing there saying nothing, looking at the floor like a coward, and I expected my parents to explode, to throw Ryan out of the house, to yell at Victoria, but instead, my mother sighed and said, "Well, I guess we'll have to deal with this as a family." Deal with this as a family? I looked at my mother like she had grown a second head. "Is that all you're going to say?" I yelled at her, and she told me to stop being so dramatic, that these things happened in relationships, that I was young and would find someone else. My father added that Victoria also had a right to be happy, that if Ryan and she had real feelings for each other, then maybe it was better that everything came out now instead of later. I felt like someone had thrown a bucket of ice water on me. My own family was defending my sister for sleeping with my boyfriend, acting like I was the one being irrational for being devastated. I left the house that night and stayed with my best friend Alex, who lived like 10 minutes away. I told her everything between sobs, and she was furious, telling me my family was completely crazy, that this wasn't normal, that no self-respecting family would justify something like this. But I kept thinking that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe my mother was right and I was being dramatic, because that's how they had conditioned me all my life. To believe that my emotions were excessive and that Victoria always knew better than me what was right. I went back home 2 days later because I had nowhere else to go. I was barely 19. I worked part-time at a coffee shop making like $8 an hour. I couldn't afford my own apartment or anything like that. When I arrived, my mother sat me down in the kitchen and gave me this speech about forgiveness and family, told me that Victoria was my sister and that siblings forgive each other, that Ryan had made a mistake, but that these mistakes make us stronger. I asked her how long they had been seeing each other behind my back, and she didn't give me a direct answer. She just said it didn't matter, that the important thing was to move forward. My father agreed with everything she said, as always, and I felt completely alone in my own house. The following weeks were an absolute nightmare. Ryan stopped talking to me completely, I guess because he didn't have the balls to face me, and Victoria acted like nothing had happened. I'd see her in the mornings getting ready to go to work, and she'd greet me with a casual hello as if she hadn't destroyed my life. My mother constantly pressured me to talk to Victoria, for things to return to normal, and when I refused, she told me I was being childish and spiteful. I started locking myself in my room every time I got home from work. I wouldn't go down to dinner with them. I basically lived in that 10 by 10 foot space trying not to exist. Sometime in January or February, I don't remember exactly, I started falling into such a deep depression that some days I couldn't even get out of bed. I stopped going to work. I lost my job at the coffee shop. And honestly, I didn't care. Alex would come see me and try to cheer me up, but I was in such a dark place that nothing she said reached me. I stopped eating well. I lost like 10 kilos in 2 months, and my mother, instead of worrying, just commented that at least now I looked better, that I had lost those extra pounds that always bothered me. That's what's fucked up about having a mother. Like that. Even your lowest moments she turns into something about your physical appearance. By March, I was completely gone. I spent my days lying down, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how unfair my life was, about how the person who was supposed to love me most in the world had chosen my sister over me. I started having dark thoughts, like really dark ones, about not wanting to be here anymore, about how it would be easier to just disappear. I had never been a suicidal person. I hadn't even considered anything like that before. But when you're at that level of pain and you feel so completely abandoned by the people who should protect you, your brain starts looking for any possible way out. One night, I think it was mid-April, I made the decision. It wasn't something impulsive. Honestly, I had been planning it for weeks. I wrote a long letter explaining everything that had happened, every detail of the betrayal, every hurtful comment from my mother, every moment my family chose. Victoria over me. I scheduled the letter to be posted on Facebook the next day, if I didn't cancel it, and I tagged my parents, Victoria, Ryan, all their friends and family. I wanted the world to know exactly what kind of people they were. I wanted them to face the consequences of what they had done to me. Then I took out all the pills I could find in the bathroom cabinet. Antidepressants my mother took, painkillers, sleeping pills, literally everything that had some kind of medical warning. and I swallowed them all with half a liter of vodka I stole from the kitchen. I don't remember much after that. I know, I started feeling very dizzy, that the room was spinning, that I was nauseous but too weak to get up to the bathroom. Apparently, Alex had a bad feeling that night. She had been calling and texting me all day, and I hadn't responded. So she showed up at my house unannounced. My mother told her I was sleeping and that I didn't want to be bothered, but Alex ignored her. Went up the stairs anyway and came into my room. She found me unconscious in my bed, surrounded by empty pill bottles, and called 911 immediately. The next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital with bright lights above me and a doctor asking me if I knew where I was. I had a tube in my throat. They had done a stomach pump on me, and honestly, at that moment, the only thing I felt was disappointment that I had survived. I was under medical observation for 2 days, and then they transferred me to the psychiatric area of the hospital, where they put me on constant suicide watch. I had an assistant sitting outside my door 24 hours. They wouldn't let me have anything I could hurt myself with. Not even shoelaces in my shoes. During those days in the hospital, only 2 people came to visit me. My paternal grandparents. My mother didn't show up. My father didn't show up. Victoria obviously didn't show up. My grandparents cried when they saw me. They hugged me and told me they had no idea how bad things were, that if they had known, they would have gotten me out of that house months ago. They explained that my parents had told them I was being dramatic about a normal breakup, that they hadn't told them the whole truth about what Victoria and Ryan had done. When they finally discharged me from the hospital after a week, my grandparents told me to come live with them, that they had an extra room and I could stay as long as I needed. I accepted without thinking twice. While all this was happening, the letter I had scheduled to be published on Facebook went public. Alex, who had access to my account because we'd been sharing passwords since high school, decided not to cancel the post after finding me. In fact, she edited it a bit herself to add context about my suicide attempt and tag even more people. The post went viral in our town. And when I say viral, I mean literally, everyone shared it. My mother was very active in the local church. Like, she went every Sunday and participated in all the community events, and suddenly all those pious Christian people were reading about how she had pushed her younger daughter to suicide by defending the older daughter who slept with her sister's boyfriend. The consequences were brutal for them. And honestly, I don't regret it one bit. My mother was basically expelled from the church. Not officially, but the congregation stopped talking to her, stopped inviting her to events. They treated her like a pariah. My father, who was a manager at a local company where everyone knew each other, lost several friends and colleagues who looked at him with contempt. Victoria, who worked in the human resources department of a medium-sized company, was publicly humiliated. Her coworkers saw the post, her friends confronted her, and from what I heard later, she had to resign because the environment became unbearable. And Ryan had his own personal hell. His parents were super religious, like the kind who go to mass every day and pray the rosary before dinner, and when they found out about the whole situation, they basically locked him up. They sent him to live with some uncles in another state for several months to get him away from the situation. The relationship between him and Victoria ended almost immediately after everything came to light. I guess it's harder to maintain a romance when everyone is calling you human scum on social media. I spent the next 6 months living with my grandparents and going to therapy twice a week. My therapist was a woman in her 50s who had seen it all and didn't mince words. She helped me understand that what my family had done to me wasn't normal, that my mother's behavior specifically was deeply toxic and manipulative, and that I had every right to be angry and to distance myself from them, if that's what I needed to heal. I told her I felt guilty about cutting off contact with my parents, that society tells you family is sacred and you should always forgive, and she told me something I'll never forget. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing people who hurt you to have access to you again. I decided to cut off all contact with my parents and Victoria. I blocked their numbers, blocked them on all social media, told my grandparents I didn't want to know anything about them. And my grandparents respected my decision, although I know it was difficult for them, especially for my grandfather, who is my dad's father. But they supported me completely. They helped me get a part-time job at an art supply store, and when I turned 21, they helped me pay for an online graphic design course that eventually became my career. During the first 2 years after everything, my parents and Victoria tried to contact me constantly. My mother sent me long letters to my grandparents' house, talking about forgiveness and family. My father called me from unknown numbers trying to get me to answer, Victoria sent me messages from new Instagram accounts begging me to talk to her. I ignored everything. The letter went straight in the trash without being opened. Every call was hung up immediately. Every message was blocked. My therapist told me I was establishing healthy boundaries and that I should be proud of maintaining them. There was a moment like 3 years after the incident when I ran into Victoria at the supermarket. I was buying milk or something, and when I turned a corner in an aisle, there she was with a cart full of groceries. We stared at each other for a second, and I could see she had changed. She looked thinner, paler. She had deep dark circles like she wasn't sleeping well. She opened her mouth to say something, probably to apologize again, but I just turned around and left. I didn't owe her anything, not even the courtesy of a conversation. Things continued like that for years. I built a completely new life away from them. I got freelance graphic design jobs that paid better and better. Eventually, I was able to move into my own small apartment like 20 minutes from my grandparents' house. I started going out with new people. I made friends in online designer communities, and slowly I started to feel like a whole person again. I still went to therapy, not as frequently, but enough to keep me stable, and my therapist helped me process the trauma whenever difficult memories or feelings came up. Like 2 years ago, something happened that I didn't expect at all. Ryan called me. I don't know how he got my new number. I assume through someone we knew in common, and when I saw his name on my phone screen, I almost blocked him immediately. But something made me answer. Maybe curiosity. Maybe I was in a mentally strong enough place to handle it. I answered with a curt, "What do you want?" and he started talking very fast, saying he needed to talk to me, that there were things I didn't know about what had happened, that he had been a coward for not telling me the whole truth at the time. I told him I wasn't interested in hearing his excuses, that years had passed, and I had moved on with my life. But he insisted, said they weren't excuses, that there was important information I deserved to know about my mother and Victoria, things that would change how I saw the whole situation. That caught my attention. I agreed to meet him at a public coffee shop, not because I trusted him, but because I was surrounded by people and felt safe. When we met, I was surprised how different he looked. He had gained weight, had gray hair even though he was only like 29 at the time, and he looked tired, like defeated. We sat down, and after an awkward silence, he started telling me things that made my stomach twist. He told me that my mother had known about the affair between him and Victoria from the beginning. She hadn't just known about it. She had encouraged it. According to Ryan, my mother had started talking to him and Victoria separately months before I caught them, telling Ryan that Victoria was more mature than me, that she would be a better partner for him, long-term, that I was too emotional and unstable. She told Victoria that Ryan really wanted her, but felt trapped in the relationship with me out of loyalty. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked him why the fuck he hadn't told me this, when everything exploded and he said my mother had threatened him. Told him that if he revealed her participation, she would tell his ultra-religious parents that Ryan had been pressuring me to have unprotected sex and that I had gotten pregnant and had an abortion, which was a complete lie, but that his parents would have believed coming from an adult woman from the church. Ryan was a coward then, and was still a coward. But I believed he was telling the truth about my mother because honestly, it fit perfectly with the kind of manipulative person she was. I left that coffee shop feeling completely dizzy. All this time, I had thought my mother had simply prioritized Victoria over me in the moment, that she had been weak or selfish, but I had never considered that everything had been orchestrated by her from the beginning. That night, I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning in my bed, thinking about all the conversations I'd had with my mother in the months leading up to the incident, trying to remember if there had been signs I had ignored. I decided to confront them. I know it sounds stupid after all those years, after having built a life without them, but I needed to hear it from their mouths. I asked Alex to come with me for moral support, and we drove to my parents' house on a Saturday afternoon. I didn't let them know I was coming. I just rang the doorbell, and when my father opened the door, he froze, looking at me like he had seen a ghost. I told him I needed to talk to him and my mother, that it was important, and he let us in although he looked nervous. My mother was in the living room watching TV, and when she saw me, she immediately stood up with tears in her eyes, started walking towards me with her arms open like she was going to hug me. I told her to stop, that I wasn't there for a happy family reunion, and she stood there with her arms still half extended, looking confused. I sat on the couch. Alex stayed standing behind me like a bodyguard, and I let out everything Ryan had told me. My mother's reaction confirmed everything was true. She didn't deny anything immediately. She just went pale and sat down slowly in her chair. My father looked at me confused, asking what I was talking about, and when I explained it to him again, he turned to look at my mother with an expression of growing horror. "Is that true?" he asked her, and after a very long silence, she nodded. What she said next broke me in ways I didn't know. She said yes, that she had encouraged the relationship between Ryan and Victoria because she honestly believed Victoria was better for him. She said I had always been too sensitive, too dramatic, too emotionally needy, and that Ryan deserved someone more stable and mature. She said Victoria had finished her degree, had a good job, was responsible, and that I at that time only worked at a coffee shop with no clear direction in life. She said that as a mother, she only wanted the best for all her children, and that in her mind, that meant Victoria should be with Ryan, and that I would eventually find someone more suitable for me. I sat there listening to this insanity come out of her mouth, unable to process that this woman really believed what she had done was justified. I asked her if she ever considered how all this would destroy me, if she thought about what it would do to my mental health, and she said she didn't expect me to react so dramatically, that she thought I would get over it in a few months like any normal breakup. I yelled at her that I had tried to commit suicide, that I had been close to dying because of her, and she had the nerve to say that hadn't been her intention, that I had chosen to react that way. My father finally spoke, and what he said surprised me. He told my mother she was sick, that what she had done was unforgivable, and turned to me apologizing profusely. He said he hadn't known anything about my mother's manipulation, that she had made him believe Ryan and Victoria had simply fallen in love spontaneously, and that if he had known the truth, he never would have defended Victoria at that moment. I don't know if I believe him completely, but something in his expression of genuine horror made me think that at least in that part he was telling the truth. I didn't stay to hear more. I stood up, told my mother she was one of the worst people I had ever met in my life, that what she had done had been psychologically abusive and cruel, and that I would never forgive her. I told my father that even if he hadn't known about the manipulation, the fact that he had defended Victoria over me when he thought it was just a natural affair was still unforgivable. I left that house with Alex behind me, and I haven't. It's been back since. That was like 2 years ago. Since then, my mother has tried to contact me several times, always with the same speech about how she only wanted the best for me, about how I misinterpreted her intentions. My father has sent me some more sincere messages, apologizing, saying he separated from my mother for a while after that conversation, although they eventually got back together. Victoria sent me a long letter like 6 months ago, admitting she knew what our mother was doing was wrong, but she was so obsessed with Ryan, she didn't care. None of those apologies mean anything to me. All those people chose to hurt me in irreparable ways, and there's no apology in the world that can undo that damage. Now, I live my life surrounded by people who really love and support me. My grandparents continue to be my main family. Alex is practically my sister, and I've built a community of close friends who are my chosen family. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer. I make good money. I have my own apartment, and I'm in a mentally stable place most of the time. I still go to therapy occasionally when I need it, and I'll probably keep going the rest of my life because the trauma from all this never completely goes away. Last week, I ran into Victoria again at a cafe near my apartment. She was alone at a table with a laptop, and I was waiting for my order. We saw each other for a second, and she started walking towards me, but I just took my coffee and left. I don't owe reconciliation to anyone. I don't owe forgiveness to anyone, and I'm not going to pretend we're family just because we share DNA. Real family is the one you choose, the one that supports you when you're falling apart, the one that saves your life literally and figuratively. And that family for me is my grandparents and Alex, not the people who almost killed me with their betrayal and manipulation.